And now you have someone coming in and just picks up the phone to Putin and it's like, okay, we're going to sort this out immediately, or we're going to do this now. And so there's this different, like, I guess so much is happening because of one particular person's values. And it could be that, I mean, he is an entrepreneur, he is a businessman, and he does have certain respect or value for efficiency and for just getting it done and for not waiting, not collaborating necessarily. And so no one's to say, well, I'm not here to judge and to say something is right or wrong. Every value is brilliant and beautiful and positive, and yet when in excess is actually a shadow and negative too. Even love, even service, even whatever, creativity. In excess, it is not helpful. You should have a balance.
Welcome to Everlutionary, a podcast about how we can heal and transform with the world. Every episode of my show, we explore conversations around philosophy, science, mysticism, social justice, how we can be change catalysts and activators and mobilize each other to create a world free of violence. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat. These are words we all hold close. Love, family, truth, justice. Words that hang like sacred lanterns in the windows of every home, regardless of language, border, or belief. They are passed down from grandmothers who survived war, etched into lullabies, sung beside dying embers, painted in children's drawings of stick figure houses and yellow suns. But something is happening. Something has gone quiet. These words, these values, no longer bind us as they once did. Instead, they tear. A mother's love in Gaza does not spare her child from airstrikes. A father's grief in Israel doesn't melt the rage of retaliation. A grandmother in Ukraine hides in a basement, praying to gods she no longer trusts. A boy in Iran limps across rubble, his knees bloodied, holding the photo of a brother he will never see again. We are in a war of values, not a war caused by a lack of them, but by their distortion, by their shrinking, by their use as weapons instead of bridges. And so we must ask, how can the same value, like family, exist in every culture and yet become the very reason we kill those we've never met? We now live in the age of contraction, of narrowing circles, of values with tight borders and expiration dates, of love that stops at nationality, of empathy that does not survive translation, of family that ends at the edge of our tribe. Even now, amid so much war, few people deny the importance of values, but we disagree on how far they extend. Who counts? Who belongs? Who deserves mercy? Who deserves justice? That is the crisis. That is the crisis. It is late June 2025, and the bombs have for now paused. Israel and Iran reached a ceasefire after nearly 2 weeks of open warfare. Hospitals collapsed, missiles howled, and over 1,000 lives were lost across cities that had once sung wedding songs and called children in for dinner. Iran called it a victory. Israel called it a defense. But the dead were neither victorious nor defended. Meanwhile, Gaza continues to weep in silence. Its fields have forgotten what spring smells like, what spring feels like. Its mothers bury sons who died simply for standing in the wrong place at the wrong time under the wrong flag. And across the Black Sea, Ukraine still bleeds. Russia's drones strike indiscriminately. Children sleep in subways, soldiers go missing, civilians die for being too close to a street lamp. And still, both sides say they fight for freedom, for dignity, for their values. Yes, they fight for values. But who gets included in those values? Who gets left behind? A strange thing happens when values go to war. It's not that one side is immoral and the other is good. No, each side believes they are upholding justice. Each side clings to honor, to family, to truth. And yet, each side still may kill. They kill in the name of love. They destroy in the name of protection. They silence in the name of safety. So maybe the question isn't whether we share values, but whether we've learned to stretch them far enough so they encompass those who we do not know. In today's world, we have turned duty into nationalism. We've turned family into exclusion. We've turned justice into revenge. And we have forgotten that a shared value is not a shared world view. Unless it includes those we fear, those we misunderstand, those we've been taught to hate. So what do we do when values fracture? When meaning splinters, when the very things meant to bring us together are used to keep us apart, we look to those who have made another way. There's a woman in Cape Town, South Africa, whose son took another boy's life. She sat across from the boy's mother, tears washing their feet like holy water, and said, "I forgive, because my healing cannot begin until yours does." There's a village in Colombia where former rebels and grieving families now share meals. No longer enemies, no longer slogans, just humans, trying to build a future wide enough to hold their shared scars. There's a circle in Ramallah where Palestinians and Israelis gather weekly. No press, no slogans, just stories. Stories of stolen land, lost brothers, shared memories of citrus trees and childhood before the fences were built. And in that circle, value lives again. Let me say this as clearly as I can. Our world is not starving for values. It is drowning in them. What we are missing is the ability to stretch them, to live them in the presence of conflict, to practice them, not only for the ones who love us, but for the ones we don't understand. Because it is easy to value family when your child is in your arms. It is harder to value family when your enemy's child is crying on your screen. So I invite you not to find new values, but to revisit the ones you already claim and ask, do they include the stranger? Do they protect the poor? Do they shelter the refugee? Do they humanize the prisoner? Do they listen to the cry of the mother who prays in a language you do not speak? Because if your values don't stretch there, they are not values, they are walls. And what the world needs now are doors. What the world needs now are doors. Today, we will keep exploring this conversation on values, a conversation which I believe roots us in some of the most important conversations. So today we are going to root ourselves in a conversation on values. Today we'll have a chance to remember to be human is to belong, not to a nation, not to a creed, but to one another. The path forward begins not with better weapons, but with better imagination. One wide enough to see a family in every single face. And I am honored today to have with me in this conversation Dr. Mandeep Rai. She's a renowned, celebrated author and speaker. Her TEDx talk has over 1 million views, and she has written a seminal book called The Values Compass. And The Values Compass is a journey to over 100 countries that provides a narrative on global diversity and how we can understand our personal values and our societal values and the challenges we face in our perceptions for coming together across our different value systems and philosophies. Dr. Mandeep Rai has a PhD in global values. She's also been on the front lines doing global reporting for the BBC and other major news outlets. She is perfectly positioned to give us some anchors and a bigger, deeper conversation on values and how we can bring more balance and healing into the world by understanding how we are shaped and driven by our values. So hold on tight as we drop into this conversation with Dr. Mandeep Rai. Peace. Hey, Dr. Mandeep Rai. Thank you for joining the Everlutionary podcast. It is so great to have you join us. I know you're currently patching in all the way from London in England. How are you today? How's everything in your life?
Ooh, mixed. It's I feel like if I'm talking to an American person, I should say great. And but the truth is mixed because there's always some great stuff, some challenging stuff, some not so great stuff. And we're just a soul having a human existence.
Now, your soul is having a human existence for sure. Your human existence has guided you to over 150 countries around the world.
Now
But
175.
now 175 countries around the world. But your journey started in a specific place and time. And I know there's a little bit about your values and how your values have been shaped through your childhood and your upbringing. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and where you grew up?
Okay. Are we going as far back as when my parents met, or are we going as far back as where I grew up? What would you like?
Let's go back. Let's go as far back to that story that we were
Yeah.
talking about. I was talking about, yeah.
All right. So I come from my grandparents are super, super inspiring to me. They worked hard, they had ambition, and you will never have children. As a parent, your child will never be the same as you, even though you think your child will be a chip off the old block. They just can't be because of their circumstances and context will be different. And normally, your children have a slightly more silver spoon than you did. So for there alone, it will be a slightly different version or a very different version. So in my father's case, his grandfather had moved back to India. So they had emigrated, the whole family, 4 boys, a family of 4 boys, and the parents had really come to England. They were part of the British military, well, really Indian military, and then the Indian military was used for the British military. So part of Second World War and First World War. And they were a Sikh family. And almost 98% of the military at that time, it could be less, but still a big proportion of the military at that time was Sikh. And it's generally a kind of a saint warrior type combination. Sikhs are both meant to be spiritual, but also strong, physically and mentally strong. And so for that reason, my grandfather was part of the military, found himself to then be part of Britain's rebuild Britain. And after some time, he really had this longing for India. He really felt like, okay, it's been duty. When can I go back and feel the sun and taste the juicy mangoes and, have my hands in the soil and grow my food again and feel whole and wholesome. And so his sons were in school in Britain, and him and my grandmother moved over to India. But the sons would come back and forth a lot. And when my father was 21, he visited his own father, so my grandfather, in Punjab. And I remember distinctly him telling us that one day he's kind of overlooking his father's fields, and his father, by that point, has bought many, 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 like hundreds of acres of fields. In fact, moved villages because it was impossible to inhabit that much land where they were living. So then he moved and became the mayor and had even more, and he was quite famous. And so all you had to say was Naranjan Saw, I'm Naranjan Saw's son. And then taxis would be free, the bus, the train, whatever. Like it was it was like a little passport. And so if Naranjan Saw's son wanted something, it kind of just happened. And Naranjan Saw's son, my father, Resham, saw a girl, 17-year-old girl, and he was 21, on a bike. And he was like, Dad, Papa, Father, मैं ओनू पसंद करता है. I like her. And my grandfather was like, well, let's see what we can do. Can't be too difficult. And with that reputation of being a London soul, went to my mother's family. Now, my mother's family were in a very tricky little situation where they were emigrating to the US, and they also had 4 children, and they had a 17-year-old daughter, my mother, and then minors because they were under 16. And so the 3 minors could go with their parents and would be going to the US. And so anyway, they were wondering what to do with the eldest daughter. What luck, Naranjan Saw's son seems to have taken a
Because
fancy.
the eldest daughter couldn't go to the US. There was like
Because
laws
she was
against that.
17, she wasn't a minor anymore. So she couldn't
okay.
go with them in the kind of something they would have had to come up with something. And here there's a proposal from this charming boy. And so maybe she could move to the UK as they moved to the US was the thinking. So I could go much deeper into all the things that transpired after, but essentially that's the beginning of it.
That's how your dad and your mom came together.
Yes.
And that's how your story begins in many ways, right?
Yeah.
And how have so you're doing so much research and reflection around global values and how global values shape our world, and how in your book, The Values Compass, is a deep dive into the way we create value within our societies, within cultures, and in countries, and between people. How have your personal values been impacted or shaped through being a child of immigrants? Because I'm assuming you were born in the UK, in the United Kingdom. Am I correct?
Yes, but I'm very still very, I would say, Punjabi or Indian or Asian in my values, and very global in my values also. So you don't just dip in and out of a country, at least I didn't. I spent time, I soak it up. I want to be Cuban in Cuba. I want to know what it is that makes a Russian person tick. I want to know how is it that we can dive in the waters of Jeddah, and then what would it be to be in Mecca and Medina and do the Hajj? So it's like this total immersion whenever I am anywhere, because there's just so much beauty. Like I'm sure you know how alive you feel when you're somewhere. Every one of your senses is stimulated. And so I'm just going to show it to you. The Values Compass literally does take you around the world, and shows you a unique quality of each place. But I have to say, I really love your approach of storytelling, because you're right that so much about a person or their values can be told through stories. So I'm open.
Well, you said earlier, so you said that you're very much Punjabi and Indian in your values. Like just starting right there, since that seems like an anchor in your own life, what does that mean to you? What are some of your values? What are the values that you hold as your compass in your own life?
So I have never said this before, but since we are talking about India and Punjabi values, whenever I'm tested, I feel as though that's when I have to really dig deep and have faith. Now, faith is like this trust, this knowingness, this patience, And if I think about how anytime I don't have that, you naturally become a little bit wound up, right? You'll be like, it's not happening. And you're stuck in that it's not happening rather than I know all will be well. Now, every time I like step foot outside of the country, I really step into, I know it would all be well. And even moments when there are danger. So, for example, in India, there are times when my mother especially had said, please go anywhere, but don't go back to India. And I spent a whole year traveling around. She often would say, I roamed around like a loose dog. She'd said it in Punjabi, like if I give you the literal translation, it sounds bad. Um, but her point was, you could get into trouble, all kinds of things will happen. Please, anywhere but there. And I know what she means because you can feel a little bit vulnerable. You can, there's a way that you're looked at that makes you feel that you're a piece of meat, frankly. Like, you have to be really, really mindful. And one way that I stepped into faith and protected myself was that I wore a turban. So now I've got a scarf on. But if I wrap this around my head, and especially a white one, it really helped to just kind of give this sense of I've already given my head, heart, being to something much greater. And people look at you in a different way. They will actually come to you in the train station or wherever and think that you will, and rightly so, that you're standing for something, that you're almost noble, or that won't you won't lie, steal, cheat, that they can trust you, and that you would almost guide them and point them in the right direction, or mentor them, or advise them, or uplift them. I experience that a lot. And when someone gives you that type of trust, or thinks that that's what you'll do, that is what you do. Suddenly, everyone's your younger sister, or your brother, or your help, or, and so there was this very interesting, beautiful relationship that would be formed where you were able to give, even though I'm the stranger, still I was able to give. Yeah.
Well, I think that's so fascinating because the way you described how someone in India may view or create assumptions around someone who wears a turban
Yeah.
as something as like deeply honorable and somebody you can trust and somebody who you have safety around and will be honest. I was living in Washington D.C. when 9/11 happened, when September 11th,
I was living in New
2001.
York at the time. I know
So
it
you're living
well.
in New York, so you
Yeah.
know very well, like, and at that time, the blowback and the Islamophobia hit
Yes.
hit hit the clouds. And it's so interesting because the values of so many Americans at that time were opposite of the values that and the perceptions that exist in India of someone who wears turbans. Because now we had Sikhs in America being mistaken for being Muslim
Yeah.
and having to deal with a lot of racist blowback and
Yeah. I
religious
reported on
blowback.
exactly that. I was a reporter based in the UN,
For who?
covering both stories with UN and for Reuters, like the UN in the morning and the NASDAQ Reuters in the afternoon. And around me, many of these attacks were taking place. I was literally in the UN building when the Twin Towers collapsed. And the kind of mandate was to mention Osama bin Laden in almost every story. Or there was a way that there was a positioning or a narrative that was being put out. And I just refused to do that because my brothers and sisters, whether they're Sikh or Muslim or Hindu, are being attacked just for the way they look, are being attacked and they have nothing to do with this, just like the next person doesn't have anything to do with this. So surely we have to show that these attacks have to stop because, it's innocent people. Um, and those reports were picked up by potentially the Sheikh of in Abu Dhabi. And I was asked to go to the UAE and they wanted to basically, I guess, utilize someone like me and create They were talking about 2454 at the time, which are the coordinates of Abu Dhabi. And they wanted to make a venture capital fund, so to invest in all kinds of media. Why should they be consuming Hollywood and Bollywood and Nollywood and other forms of media and other people's media when actually people don't understand what the Middle East is, what it stands for, who are Muslims? Muslims are not synonymous to terrorism. It's like actually a completely, very compassionate, incredible religion if you really know it. And if one thing that Sikhs do well, I think, or Sikhs are meant to do, is to stand for those that are being oppressed. And at the time, Muslims were definitely being oppressed. And so it was my own Sikh advisor, by Mohinder Singh Aluwalia, Bhai Sabji, who said, "Bete, like child, if you're debating which job to take, this would be the one to take, because if we can stand up for those that are being attacked right now, if it means you have to go to Abu Dhabi, set up this fund, go do it with an open heart and mind.
Yeah.
This is precious. This is timely. This is important."
It's so important. It's so important. So backing up a little bit, just kind of creating a baseline even for everybody. How do you define a value? Like what are values in your opinion? As an expert in, and just a little side note for our listeners, I mean, as somebody who has a PhD in global values, you've literally studied global values your whole life. So it's can't think of somebody more prepared to answer this question.
So a value is what's most important to you. If I take it in a layman's term, like literally, it's what do you value? Some people value, like you increase value, you reduce value, etc., etc. But if I talk about what it is that actually motivates you, inspires you, enriches you, what is it that you're attracted to? What is it that you need? What is like a fundamental, basic, something that you live by, something that you is almost like in your stomach. It is so true and has to be there. And if it's violated, you know it in your stomach too. So a value is what you truly, truly, truly is important to you, or that you value.
Yeah. And through your work and through this book, what are some of the most common values you found threaded across the globe? Like what are the most shared human values in your research?
Well, people talk about people values unite and beliefs divide. So people might talk about Republicans and Democrats being very different to one another, but in fact, they're not. They actually share a lot of the same core values. In fact, the world, humanity shares a lot of the same core values. We all want a safe place for our children. We all want to know that education is possible, that we can live a healthy life. In terms of health, I mean mind, body, spirit. We all value that. We all value health. Otherwise, during COVID, if your country asked you to literally be indoors for 2 years, you were prepared to do it because health is that important, and we value health. We all value a sense of safety, and when there isn't safety, you know that you will fight for that, or you'll aim for that, or you'll protect yourself, or you'll protect the other. We all actually value community, because community is almost like the fabric or the bedrock. We call it sangat, of happiness. So why are we on technology? Because we're trying to form trying to create another form of community. The fact that it perhaps isn't doing that, or is not doing that in this, it's not a substitute or whatever, doesn't mean that we're not trying. You see what I'm saying? That there are certain needs. We generally value love, empathy, compassion, creativity. All these things, some people value some of these things more than others. Some will value excellence or have high standards, whereas other people might value freedom. I'm not saying one is, again, less than the other, but I'm just saying that there are nuances and differences in us, but there are some things that are the baseline core.
Let me peel back the onion with you a little bit deeper, because I'm so curious, because I also, like, I want to yes and what you just said. for sure, I think we all share a lot of those values globally around the world, no matter if you're in Kenya or in Brazil or in Japan or Canada. I think there's a lot of shared human values. And I want to ask
And
you,
there are lots of differences.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of ends, right? Because there's actually
Yes.
some people that value themselves and
Yes.
um, their own power
Individual needs. Yeah.
and individual needs more than they value somebody else's in
Sure.
the
Sure.
community or in their country or in a country that's not their country, right? The value is pretty stark. There's some people that value, and there's that quote, the famous quote, like, which I'm going to riff on right now, but there's some people that value power and having power more than the power of love, right? Where the power of love is something that many people value, but some people actually value having power more than the power of love. So that's my little riff on that quote. But
Sure. No, it's very true.
how do we deal
Mm.
with that? Yeah, how do we deal with that stark difference?
So firstly, our values are partly nature, partly nurture. And so they're socioeconomic, context related, the nurture parts. It depends on our climate. It depends on how abundant things were or are. It depends on what the rest of the community is like, what everyone else is valuing. So if you think about, I don't know, let's take a random country as an example. Give me one, because then it'll be, it'll show we're really
Uh,
live.
Rwanda.
Okay. So Rwanda is interesting because it's had such a unique history. And in Rwanda, there was a very significant period. In fact, even now, Hutu and Tutsis were mentioned in Congo. There's even now war and, conflict over these ethnicities. And so when these two kind of, I don't want to call them tribes, but ethnicities when there was a clash, there was literally a cleansing happening. And it was tearing society and the fabric of society apart. So Paul Kagame, who's still in power, literally said, okay, from now on, no more, no one is going to distinguish between the two. Let's clean up our language. So the value is cleanliness. Let's clean up our language. Let's clean up literally our clothes. Let's wear a uniform. Let's clean up Kigali, the capital. Pick up the litter, pick up the pollution. Let's clean up the countryside. And I was on cleanup missions in the countryside. Let's clean up, our inside and our outside. So our mind, our thoughts, our spirit, and our surroundings, what we're wearing. Like secondhand clothing is not uncommon. But in Rwanda, they were like, don't give a secondhand underwear or anything. We're cleaning up, like almost like godliness is next to cleanliness. And
Mm.
so in doing that, they literally were clearing up their past to clear their future. And that was just one example that you asked for because you randomly shared Rwanda. But to think today, we here in Britain, for example, are so trusting of Rwanda that we will say, okay, we're going to send, loads of, fill up planes of migrants and send them to Rwanda, not anywhere else, but to Rwanda. And there's this reputation it has of being a place that's safe, clean, clear. And even though the world often talks about democracy, Paul Kagame has run that country for many, many years and people are grateful for it. So it's interesting. Could you have held those standards of cleanliness had you not had that stability of power? I wonder. But you can see how if that nation didn't have those standards, then would it have created the future it has created?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? How
Yeah.
it pivoted around a particular value. So some values are very deliberate like that, whereas some values are much more organic and have just naturally come about. So you were talking about love or power. So if I talk about Brazil, the value of love, mais amor, por favor, like, may there be more love, please. And whether it's in the Carnival of Rio, or in the favelas of Sao Paulo, or wherever you are, whether you're in the Amazon or whether you're in Pantanal, there's a sense of, if we look after one another, if we look after our planet, if we look after literally the Amazonian basin, if we love, truly love, if I, when I'm standing next to you, notice that your shoulders are dropping, or notice that you need more liquid, or, that type of empathy and love, or care and love, then what a different planet we have. And there is this sense of love comes first. We want love, more love, please. And you see it in celebrations, in times of stress, in times of misery and heartache. They're the ones who are looking after a toad, a group of toads or frogs that some countries will come and just take the saliva of one of them and then create synthetic medicine. But they've looked after that community of toads and frogs for many, many generations. And hopefully, God willing, they'll continue to. And yet someone else then profits. So you see that sense of love. Yeah.
Well, it's so much. I mean, love is definitely permeating, I think, through much of human consciousness. And I think there's a deep yearning for tenderness and for love to really be the shared value that's not just an ideal value, but an express and manifested value. And you said something way earlier. You said that values are things that we can kind of unite around, but beliefs are what divide us. And I'm kind of back into this question of yes, there are many people in Brazil, and Rwanda for that matter, that hold deeply to cherishing love and community. And at the same time, there's Brazilians that are chopping down the rainforest, and logging and mining, and destroying the very precious natural resources that are left that provides oxygen into our atmosphere so that life can persist and so that climate change doesn't.
Agree, but that's not to say there's a lack of love. So, for example, if your child is sick or there's not enough to eat and you don't have any other, there truly isn't any other solution. I don't know this context in which, but I'm just saying that then is that a lack of love? If a mother, the lioness, is looking after her cubs and this is her environment and she's been the custodian for so many generations and now she's the one, or her cubs are the one who are starving, or her children are starving, then isn't that still love?
That's so true. No, it's very true. Yeah.
We can't be so prescriptive, judgmental, or black and white. Judgment really does kill love. Love is like understanding. And like you said, tenderness and caring and soothing, and really like walking in your shoes and saying, what can we do to make this easier, more pleasant, more enriching, more enlivenment. Like I have that as a value. Like what, you know what I mean? To really deeply sacrifice and care and
I mean, love is definitely what drives that behavior, even when it's the love of wanting to protect those around you who are perhaps struggling or starving. And so you have to make decisions that are compromising your values because
always just the difference. It's just
we're in survival.
Love, but that love is trumping your love for the planet at that point because sustainability and being good to the planet is a privilege. Like we have to, if I think about the brand Patagonia, you have to earn quite a bit to have the privilege to be able to, look after the planet the way that brand does. But then if I think about others who barely have enough to eat, does that mean that they don't love their planet? No. If they have the privilege and then they can grow their own food, great. But if they're not, if they're in a slum or in a favela in the back streets, and actually there are shotguns all the time, and you know what I mean? Like,
looking after the planet is a privilege. That's very true. And looking after other people even sometimes can be a privilege, right? It's it does require a sense of having your own personal needs met to the point where you can actually go out and take care of other people. It's a deep privilege to be able to even think about other people, because that means that you have enough internal resources and external resources available to you that you can be now directing your attention outwards towards others.
Yes and no. I think when you're helping people, even if you don't have enough, there is such an enrichment and beauty that comes from that. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama taught me something that I would never, ever, ever forget. And it can be summarized with, if you knew the power of sharing, you'd never let a meal go unshared again. So it's not saying when you have enough to eat, will you then give? It's saying, if you knew that every single one of your meals, no matter how little you have, if you share it, there is such an enormous power of both giving and receiving. The abundance that comes from just that is much greater than thinking, once I've got enough, then I will give. Really.
I love that. Are there any more stories you have that can help tease out that same sense of giving? Because that's really powerful.
Of, generosity.
Of generosity, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. If I think about, I don't mean to say people are generous everywhere. But the principle of seva, like giving and serving another, is really, really, really core to Sikhi. And so I've seen Sikhs be there at the bushfires in New Zealand or LA. Sikhs be there even when there's times of danger and the tsunami. For Sikhs to be there when COVID was happening, I saw Sikh gurdwaras, temples, being converted into hospitals and converted into kitchens. I mean, the gurdwara is always a 24-hour kitchen, but then feeding, like here, even in England, we fed the NHS. It was like food, bundles after bundles after bundles after bundles after bundles, like giving. And I saw many gurdwaras become, as I mentioned, not just hospitals, but vaccination centers. Just that sense of being there in someone's time of need. That kind of generosity. It's not that they thought, oh, we have to get a mask and be protected first before we look after another. We're all wondering what's happening. We're all in like this crazy situation, but you know that if you start doing something about it, it will be better than not. I do think there's an incredible upliftment and beauty in seva or thinking about another. So even in your most trying times, if you can think of another, I think you will naturally overcome that. I've seen people overcome that situation because you're not putting yourself as the focus.
Right.
You're already given. You already have decided, I've been given more than enough. I can do something for someone else. And already then, you know what I mean? There's like this elevation of you and the other.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm so glad you rooted us within that reminder. And you spent time with the Dalai Lama, or this was through teachings that you've had with him in person?
I've been really blessed to spend a lot of time with him, to the point that I remember when the book came out, they were like, finally, good. Okay, this is, and this is their subject, values. It's not, this is not me. This book is not me. This book is hundreds and thousands of many interviews, but many people who have taught me what values are and how they've shaped their leadership or their kind of environment or their qualities. Like I remember one time I was in Ladakh, like in the Himalayas.
Yeah, northern India.
Yeah,
right?
but almost kind of Tibet. Yeah. And really, really like, Pahari, like really, really mountainous. And even though they're so high up and everywhere else, that sense of being good to the environment, it's a cold, it's snowy, it's whatever. Like you don't have to think too much about the environment, you would have thought. But they made this conscious effort to just ban plastic. They're like, plastic is choking not just our rivers and our seas and our oceans, it's choking everything. Like we have to ban plastic. And yet they're the 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 like delicacy of the area, or the special fruit of the area were apricots, and so everyone would want to buy their special apricot jam or their apricot juice or apricot this, apricot that, and they would always tie it up in cloth. They wouldn't ever, you couldn't bribe them to give you a plastic bag. You couldn't
Mm.
say, "Oh, I'm going on a flight and I really need a plastic bag." And I remember, and I say this because at one time the BBC had asked me, "Why don't you just be a little bit of an undercover journalist here and just see, what their response is to these different excuses you have of why you need plastic?" And I remember someone hearing that story or that report, because it was on the World Service in, I feel like saying in Uganda, in like these in another part of, like, literally in Central Africa or South Africa and Eastern Africa, and think, wow, if they can do it, why can't we? And to
Mm.
be inspired by that, that was a really beautiful moment when I heard that had
Yeah.
happened and they went back. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when all that was happening. I spent some time in Himachal Pradesh, which is
Yeah, yeah,
northern India,
yeah.
the state of northern India. I was living in Sidbadi, which is near Dharamsala, and I remember when I went back. I'd been there multiple times in my life, and I remember going back one year, and you could not get plastic anywhere, and because they had also banned plastic bags in Himachal Pradesh. And I was, like, blown away because for listeners that have never traveled to India, if you had been to India 15 or 20 years ago, there was, like, plastic bags were all over the streets everywhere at all times. I mean, it was just littered with plastic bags and wrappers and discarded Lay's potato chip bags, and I mean, it was just so much, we call it kachra, so much kachra all over the streets, and then I was just amazed. I was like, "Wow, this state has banned plastic bags." This is a really profound moment driven by values, right? Driven by
Yes.
the value. What was the value that you think drove that decision?
I think it's truly like caring and taking a ground, taking a stance. So whether it's, we're going to plant millions of trees, which are happening across India, or whether it's we're going to abstain from food, which happened during independence, because of Mahatma Gandhi, whatever it is, it's this sense of principle that we're going to stand for something much greater than ourselves. And that brings us back beautifully full circle, to the beginning of faith. We're going to stand for something greater and have faith that this will make a difference. Because if we're always in that kind of capitalist, go, 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 only about ourselves, there's no end to that. And that's not
Yeah,
necessarily a community that you want to live in if everyone's only ever thinking about themselves. So it's to come together and stand for something much greater.
yeah. So we're living in a time, you mentioned Republicans and Democrats earlier. We're living in a time where there's so much hyperpolarization around the world. Uh, you're making a case that we actually share a lot of common values. There's common values that humanity shares. And I'm so interested in the future of humanity. Like, how do we get from point A to point Z? And to me, point Z is a world where we are able to live with safety, security, sustainability, um, driven by compassion and community values. But right now, we're pretty far from that. I mean, it seems to me, at least, like maybe it's the news cycles, maybe it's what I experience in the United States with all the polarization, which to me is driven by. It seems like people have different values. There's some people that value uh, that that have certain values, and there's other people that have different values, and so these different values are creating a real polarization and a divide. But are you are you are you saying that it's not values, it's beliefs that are dividing people? And can you help us make that distinction if that's the
I
case?
think what you're talking about, because if you were to take, we gave that example of Republicans and Democrats. If you were to take an individual has actually similar desires, wants, motivations, values as the next person, like not too different, basically. Humanity all wants to evolve into its better self. But what you're talking about, the influence, the impact that certain leaders, so right now we're in a particular leadership where so many, for years we've always heard every president seems to say there's so much red tape, there's so much bureaucracy, it will take us time to do this, etc., etc. And now you have someone coming in and just picks up the phone to Putin and it's like, okay, we're going to sort this out immediately, or we're going to do this now. And so there's this different, I guess so much is happening because of one particular person's values. And it could be that, he is an entrepreneur, he is a businessman, and he does have certain respect or value for efficiency and for just getting it done and for not waiting, not collaborating necessarily. No one's to well, I'm not here to judge and to say something is right or wrong. I think America has been built on that level of kind of pivoting until something works, or to be entrepreneurial. And so with every value, and this is where I'm going to kind of bring it to a close, every value is brilliant and beautiful and positive, and yet when in excess is actually a shadow and negative too. Even love, even service, even whatever, creativity. In excess, it is not helpful. You should have a balance. And so what the Values Compass does, it deliberately takes you on a journey so that you pick your 5 values, because there's a real power in 5, and it gives you a sense of balance. It's not that you are only skewing everything onto 1 or 2 values. And so if you're only thinking about efficiency or entrepreneurship or whatever, obviously that is a terrible place to be, because it's so harsh. And yet if you're only thinking about love or service, then you can burn out, and that also isn't great for you. So to choose 5 core values, and more importantly, to prioritize them, to have a number 1 that's most important, and then a second that's, literally second and third and fourth and fifth. Why? Because they're all the same. Again, it's still hard to make decisions, and still hard to for it to really be a compass that's taking you to your true north.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a really great frame for all of us to kind of consider right now in this moment in time when it sounds like what's more important is just not overly putting too many chips into one value, because then that will in turn, it will also create a lot of collateral damage, which is what we're seeing, right? Because there's not the value of also like considering the impact of your actions on a whole bunch of people.
Exactly.
There's a value of wanting to get things done, which is important, but then there's another value that's missing, which is let's get things done in a way that can honor that there's a lot of people that are being somehow
stepped upon,
impacted.
Exactly.
Right, stepped upon, hurt,
potentially.
injured, losing their jobs, losing their land, losing their livelihood because of that experience. And so, like, how do we find that balance? I love the way you've created a great frame for all of our listeners to understand values in our lives. Your book, The Values Compass, tell us where we can find your book, and how can listeners get a hold of your book if they're interested in going deeper into global values.
This should be available in your local bookshop. If it's not, please order it and ask them for it. If it's not, then you can always Amazon. If that's not there, you can always go to audiobooks. If that's not possible, then there are ebooks. It's available in all, literally across the world, and in many different languages. And if it's not in your language and you want it to be, then contact your local publisher, and I'm sure we can make that happen too. So
amazing.
It's a sacred space where you can really become clear about what matters to you, because there's a whole kind of a framework that helps you get there. And so it's a tool that helps you make better, clearer, more impactful decisions. And those values will become habits, and incrementally it will bring a change to your life. Every single day you'll see a shift.
Yeah. And does that book also help somebody figure out what their personal values are? Do you have exercises in the book? Okay, great. So it's a chance for our listeners to figure out what your values are, your personal values, and then how you
Both your
can
personal
really.
values, and also you can use it in your family. You can also use it in your charity or in your organization or in your company or indeed across your country. So
Wow.
it's any concentric circle.
Amazing. And we'll have links to the book. We'll have links to Dr. Mandeep Rai's work in the show notes. Make sure you check out the show notes. Please pick up the book and keep thinking about how values in your life are impacting your relationships and the world around you, and how we can create more balance to restore and create more peace and sustainability in the world. Thank you, Dr. Mandeep Rai.
You're very welcome.
Thank
All
you,
our
Dr.
decisions are
Mandeep
based on
Rai.
values. So the more we can become clear about them, the more you'll choose the right kind of partner or the place to live or the right kind of job, whatever. All of that becomes easier when you get this bit right. So spend a few
Amazing.
minutes, spend 15, 20 minutes with it, do the exercise, and all will become clear. And you'll be leading and leaving the legacy you wish to leave.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much for all of your time. Thank you for patching in, and we will love to have you back one day for another follow-up on human values and global values.
Sounds good. I hope to see you on any of you on LinkedIn or any of the social media channels or indeed other. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Be well.
All right, and you.
Everlutionary, transforming and healing the world, is brought to you by me, Hawah Kasat. If you would like to find out more about my story, head to hawahkasat.com and visit social media, where I'm active on Instagram, Substack, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Be sure to share this podcast with a friend, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thank you for listening. Stay in touch. Peace.